Welcome back. You must be tired. Come on in.
Thanks.
When my husband and I arrived at my in-laws' house, my mother-in-law greeted us with a smile. However, she only invited my husband inside. As I tried to enter, she glared at me and said,
"You're not needed here."
She slammed the door shut. What? I was completely taken aback. I gently opened the door, only to find my mother-in-law glaring at me with fury.
"I heard about it. Your parents are in debt, aren't they? We don't need a wife like that."
With that, she slammed the door again. I stood there, bags in hand, stunned. From inside, I could hear my husband and mother-in-law laughing and having a good time. I realized I didn't need to endure this kind of treatment just to be at my in-laws' house, so I quickly left. My name is Nancy. I'm a 32-year-old doctor working at the hospital my parents founded. I met my husband John when he was admitted to our hospital after an injury. He's charming, friendly, and a great conversationalist. Even though he's 5 years younger, he seemed mature and dependable. We got married after a year of dating. He works as a vice president at the company his father runs. Mother-in-law also worked as an office worker at father-in-law's company. Both his parents were thrilled when we got married.
Your parents run a big hospital and now a doctor is becoming our son's wife? It's like a dream. We're so glad to have you, Nancy.
My mother-in-law used to be so kind to me. Every year, during Christmas and other long holidays, we would visit my in-laws' house. They always welcomed us warmly. I would bring delicious food and drinks as gifts, which they would use for New Year's celebration. My mother-in-law would take the lead in cooking, and even though I would offer to help, she would decline.
"Nancy, you work hard as a doctor. Just relax."
Your family. Don't feel like you have to do anything.
My husband would add. I always looked forward to these visits, but today was different, especially my mother-in-law. She looked at me as if I were an enemy, her gaze cold and piercing, almost like a vampire. This was the first time I had experienced such coldness from them. Death at my parents' house? I had never heard of such a thing. I have a younger brother, 2 years my junior, who's also a doctor. We both work at our family's hospital. Recently, my father called me for a discussion about his health, but there was no mention of any debt. Driving home, I remembered a conversation with my husband from a week ago. Both of us have busy jobs, but that day, we happened to come home at the same time. My dad's retiring from being a doctor. He says his eyesight isn't what it used to be, especially for surgery. So they have decided to close the hospital. My husband looked shocked and exclaimed,
What? The hospital's closing? Do they have debts or something?
I'm not sure about debts, but they're planning to sell the hospital property.
So you won't be working at the hospital anymore?
I'll be taking a break for a while, but before I could finish, I received an emergency call from the hospital and had to leave immediately. We'll continue this later. I had said that, but there was hardly any time for it. Afterwards, my husband claimed he was busy at work and came home late. With my night shifts, we hardly spoke. I'm sure he exaggerated our conversation, thinking my parents' hospital had closed due to debts, and that I was involved in paying them off. He must have told his parents that. Still, the cold treatment from my mother-in-law was unbelievable. Lost in these thoughts, I was heading home when I heard phone ringing from my bag. Locked out by my mother-in-law, I had driven off with my husband's belongings still in the car. His phone was in the bag, ringing non-stop. I had never looked at his phone before, but thinking it might be urgent, I decided to check. I pulled over, took out his phone, and tried a few passwords. Knowing my husband's aversion to complications, I figured it wouldn't be too complex, as I thought it unlocked with his birthday. The caller was a woman named Susan, a name I hadn't heard before. Checking the history, there were numerous exchanges with Susan. The messages were shocking.
I want to see you soon.
I wish I could be with Susan forever. I'll be with my wife during the New Year holidays. I'll miss you. Once I get the money, I plan to leave her.
Really? That makes me happy.
I love Susan the most.
It seemed my husband had been cheating on me. I had thought of my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law as kind-hearted. I was the only one. Back home, I couldn't shake off the contents of his phone. I went into his study, looking for more evidence. Opening a drawer, I found photos of him with an unfamiliar woman apparently from a trip and hotel receipts. There were other shocking discoveries. Unable to come to terms, I decided to visit my parents' house. When I rang the doorbell, my mother, surprised, opened the door. "Why are you here so late? You look pale. Are you okay?" Seeing her caring face, tears streamed down. Noticing my state, she wrapped me in a blanket. My father, sensing something was wrong, asked,
What happened?
I told them about the in-laws and the affair. My mother was shocked and my father was furious.
It's so terrible. Ungrateful people.
Turns out, my husband's family business wasn't doing well. They often approached my father for financial help, which he provided, thinking of me.
Maybe you should play along for a while and see their true colors.
My father suggested. It seemed intriguing at the time. The next day, I returned to my in-laws' house and shouted at the entrance,
I'm sorry for being an immature wife. Please let me in.
I brought various gourmet ingredients and fine wine as gifts, finally gaining entry into the house. My mother-in-law, seeing the luxurious gifts, marked greedily. Behind her, my father-in-law and husband gave me cold stares.
We only treated you well because we thought you were the daughter of a prestigious hospital. Now that we know your family's hospital is drowning in debt, you'll work hard as a wife.
I understand. From then on, the harassment towards me was relentless.
Come on, start cooking.
She kicked me towards the kitchen. Using the ingredients I brought, I prepared dishes and served them. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband eagerly began eating.
Hey, we are out of wine. Bring the next bottle. You're so inattentive.
Is this all you cooked? You might be a smart doctor, but you're a terrible housewife.
Despite their complaints, they finished every dish. When they were done and I tried to eat, my mother-in-law slapped my hand, causing my fork to drop.
What are you doing sitting? You think you're eating with us? Housekeepers eat leftovers in the kitchen.
So I'm a housekeeper now?
How dare you talk back with all your family's dead?
John, do you feel the same way?
I never liked your arrogant attitude, Nancy. I tolerated it because I thought your family was wealthy. Listen to Mom. I'll keep you around as a housekeeper.
Hearing my husband's true feelings, I was stunned. I had hoped he was just going along with his parents, but that hope was shattered. He had married me for my family's supposed wealth and had been pretending all along. I realized that my husband's current behavior was his true nature. I ended up eating leftovers in the cold kitchen and was left with a mountain of dishes.
Save water and wash with cold.
Quite a terrible story. In the freezing winter, washing dishes with icy water was cruel. It was so cold that my whole body trembled. And for sleep, my mother-in-law pointed to a shed with no heating or bed. Where's the bed?
What? You think you're getting a bed? There are old towels and cardboard in the shed. Make do.
I understood their true nature. Thankfully, I had recorded their abusive words. I had no more business in this house. That night, in the freezing shed, anger towards my father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband kept me warm. I'll never forgive them. Late at night, after they drunkenly passed out, I drove back to my parents' house. After a good night's sleep, as I was packing the next morning, the door burst open. My mother-in-law and husband stormed in.
You think you can just leave without making breakfast?
What's the meaning of leaving your husband behind?
Their contemptuous looks were terrifying. It seemed my father-in-law was at work, but my husband and mother-in-law had come to berate me further. I am done with both of you.
You dare talk back to your mother-in-law and husband? You're even worse than I thought.
We can divorce if you want, but if you initiate it, you will pay compensation.
Maybe you can sell the hospital's land. It should fetch a good price. We'll take that.
That's a good idea. I said it sarcastically, but my husband just smirked, thinking he had the upper hand. Then he threw a paper at me. It was a pre-filled divorce application.
If you don't do as I say, I'll use this.
Good. This clears things up for me.
What?
You thought I would beg you not to leave?
You, with a bankrupt hospital and drowning in debt, have no choice but to cling to me, right?
He was completely mistaken. While it's true my father retired and closed the current hospital, we plan to relocate to a new facility near the train station. My brother and I would work there with me as the director. Far from being in debt, we had more than enough assets. Upon hearing this, my husband and mother-in-law turned pale.
That's a lie, right?
You deceived me?
I tried to explain, but you didn't listen and jumped to conclusions.
So your family is still wealthy? Then what I did was...
My mother-in-law mumbled, panicking.
Can we forget everything that happened yesterday and today? We have always been on good terms, right?
After all the insults, she now wanted to forget everything? It was laughable. I'm shocked that you have spewed such terrible abuse at me and asked me to forget everything. Remember, I'm just the housekeeper, right?
No, that was a misunderstanding. I'm sorry, please let it go.
It's too late. I know your true feelings. By the way, my father will be taking back the $100,000 he loaned to your company.
What? How did you know about that? We don't have that money.
My husband started to panic, realizing the gravity of his mistake.
Nancy, I'm sorry. I should have defended you from Mom. I promise to protect you from now on.
You mean protect Susan, right?
How did you know about Susan?
You were cheating while pretending to work late. I have all the evidence. I showed him the photos and email exchanges on my phone. He stared at the evidence, sweating profusely. You will be the one paying compensation.
Susan was just a fling. I met her at a bar. I'll break up with her. Please forgive me.
He began to apologize, looking pitiful. While apologizing, sweat and drool spilled onto the floor, making him look miserable. That's not all. I showed him a photo of a life insurance policy taken out on me and a detailed pamphlet about car maintenance. There was a marked section about tampering with car brakes.
That's...
You not only wanted my family's money, but also my life? I have consulted the police, so you can't harm me anymore.
My company's in trouble. I need the money. Please help me.
Don't joke. We'll communicate through lawyers from now on. I never want to see your face again.
What?
As he lunged at me, my father and brother emerged from the back room, grabbing his arm and protecting me. My husband, pinned to the ground, cried, while my mother-in-law stood there, stunned. The house was purchased under my name. I'll be selling it, so please leave as soon as possible. My husband and mother-in-law, who always had an excuse not to leave, were sadly sent away by my brother. After that, I got a divorce. I received compensation from my husband and the woman he cheated with. He kept begging to get back together. When I threatened to consult the police because he was too persistent, he stopped coming around. Through a lawyer, I demanded repayment from my father-in-law's company, and the $100,000 my father had lent was safely returned. My father-in-law's business, which was already struggling, went bankrupt with a lot of debt. My father-in-law, mother-in-law, and husband now live in an old apartment. They juggle multiple part-time and day jobs, but can't seem to keep up with their debts. I work as the director of a newly built hospital. With my brother's help, We are dedicated to helping those suffering from injuries and illness. It's fulfilling every day. I bought a comfortable apartment near the hospital, and I'm enjoying living my own life.
My name is Myra. I reconnected with Corey, my current partner, at a high school reunion. Back in high school, we just knew each other's names and faces. But we hit it off at the reunion after sitting next to each other and started dating soon after. Corey proposed to me recently, so we're getting married. I had met my future in-laws, father-in-law, and mother-in-law a few times since Corey and I started dating. The only person I hadn't met was Corey's sister, Kristen. While father-in-law and mother-in-law always welcomed me warmly, Kristen would never come out of her room, and it's been bothering me. What does Kristen think of me?
Don't worry about her. She's just shy.
On the day of the family meeting, Corey tried to calm my nerves by saying that Kristen was just shy. I felt relieved hearing Corey's words, but we soon discovered that the assumption she's just shy was a major mistake. We're so happy that you're going to be Corey's wife.
Corey, you've really stepped up. Make sure you make Myra happy. I will.
Both father-in-law and mother-in-law were thrilled when we told them we're getting married. Just need to tell Kristen too, mother-in-law said, leaving her seat. As Corey, father-in-law, and I were chatting, a loud voice came from Kristen's room. What? Startled, we heard the sound of a door slamming. Kristen stormed into the room and glared at me. I will never accept this marriage. As I stood there shocked, mother-in-law followed Kristen, saying, Hold on, Kristen. But Kristen didn't stop. Marriage is disgusting. Just the thought of having strangers in the house is bad enough, but getting married? Seriously, no way. That's just gross.
Kristen!
Father-in-law raised his voice in anger, but Kristen ignored him, scanning me from head to toe. Then, crossing her arms, she snorted. Corey's taste in women is just awful. Why on earth would he marry someone as unattractive as you? Just thinking about what the kids would look like sends shivers down my spine. Can Corey even handle raising a child like this?
Of course he can. What are you even saying, sis?
Anyway, I'm against this marriage. I don't want her in our family. Don't you dare show your face here ever again. At Kristen's outburst, Corey and his parents scramble in panic.
Stop it!
They all try to silence Kristen, their voices seeming to echo from far away. Gathering myself, I stood up and said something I never thought I would say. Fine. I won't ever come back to this house.
Myra, I'm sorry for my sister. I want to marry you.
Yeah, I still want to marry Corey. We will get married, but I will never come to this house again, and I will never see Kristen for the rest of my life. This discussion is over. I said I don't want you to get married! Ignoring Kristen's yelling, I started to prepare to leave. As I was leaving, I looked at Kristen and said, I don't need your approval for the marriage. Corey's parents' blessing is more than enough. Rest assured, since we'll never meet again, there won't be any awkward family get-togethers. No matter how much you object, I won't give up marrying Corey. Goodbye. I'll never forget what you've said to me. Keeping a straight face, I bid my goodbyes to my shocked in-laws and left. I hurried home, with Corey frantically following behind, apologizing with a near teary face. Truth be told, I was really hurt by Kristen's words. Once we were out of sight of his parents and Kristen, tears started to flow as Corey apologized to me. It's really sad that your sister won't accept our marriage and that I can never return to that house. But I still want to marry you, Corey. I'm sorry I'm not the woman Kristen thinks I should be. Holding back tears and with a trembling voice, I got hugged by Corey, who told me, "You've done nothing wrong, Myra." Feeling his warmth, I reaffirmed my commitment to marrying Corey. As I had declared, Corey and I got married and started our life together. We had a wedding, and both of us agreed not to invite Kristen. Corey's parents repeatedly apologized for Kristen's behavior, but our relationship with them remained good. Blessed by the family, except Kristen, Corey and I started our married life. However, Kristen was furious when she found out we got married. She yelled at Corey over the phone on our wedding night. "Why did you marry such an awful woman? This is the worst!" Corey eventually just put his phone aside. Fed up with the noise, he finally said, "Just leave us alone," in a tired voice as he hung up. Since then, our marriage has been problem-free. Since I had declared that I wouldn't visit my in-laws, I haven't been to their place since that day. Instead, my in-laws, concerned about our lives, have been visiting us occasionally. Whenever they visited, they apologized for Kristen's behavior, to which I would reply, "It's okay. I'm happy I married Corey." Looking back, I think it's a good thing we've cut ties with Kristen, who is quite a handful. If we hadn't, I shudder to think we'd still be hearing complaints from her. Then, just a few months into our marriage, I became pregnant. Corey was ecstatic. Even before we knew the baby's gender, he'd already started buying baby clothes and reading fatherhood books. I was feeling really happy. Then one day, I received a call from an unknown number. Though skeptical, I thought it might be from the maternity clinic or the local government office, so I answered. And I heard a voice I didn't want to hear. "Myra? Long time no see. It's your sister-in-law, Kristen." Why is Kristen calling me now? Especially after she so adamantly rejected me becoming part of the family. Confused, I muttered, "Why?" And Kristen filled me in. "I found your number in Mom's phone," Kristen informed me. "Corey has blocked me, so I thought I'd tell you." "Tell me what?" Speaking in a much gentler tone than I remember, Kristen dropped a bombshell. "I'm getting married to Ronald, a classmate of you and Corey." Ronald was indeed our high school classmate. According to Kristen, they started dating through a work connection, which happened to be Ronald. Both Kristen and Ronald work locally, so it's not surprising they'd cross paths. But I couldn't hide my shock that Kristen, who had been so against marriage, was now planning to tie the knot. "You're getting married? You, Kristen?" "Yes. Why the surprise tone? It's rude. Ronald will be at the next family meeting, so you both should come. It'd be weird if you weren't there." Okay. Had Kristen forgotten everything she had said and done? She had yelled at me, humiliated Corey and her parents, and never once apologized. I felt the back of my head heat up with anger. "We'll be looking forward to it," I said, keeping my cool. "Just so you know, don't mess this up. If you ruin my marriage with Ronald, you won't get away with it." After being told off by Kristen, I stood in front of the calendar. I circled the date Ronald told us he'd be coming for a family meeting at my in-laws. I waited for that day with bated breath. Days passed, and finally the day Ronald was set to visit arrived. Corey and I dressed up nicely and left our house to greet him. When we reached the front of my in-laws' property, it seemed Ronald had just arrived. Seeing Ronald and Kristen waving at us from their car, Corey and I smiled back. "It's been a while since the wedding. Myra and Corey, how have you been?" "We've been good, Ronald. Myra's expecting, actually." "Really? Congratulations." Ronald greeted me with his familiar, warm smile from high school. He leaned in towards the baby bump and said, "Can't wait for you to join us, little one." "Thank you," I replied. Standing next to Ronald, Kristen walks onto the property of her in-laws and gently says, "Let's go." "No," I responded with a smile. "I'm not allowed inside the house anymore. So, Ronald, I'm sorry, but I'll have to consider this family meeting over." "Huh?" Kristen's face flushed with rage while Ronald looked puzzled. Realizing Ronald was clueless, I decided to clarify. When Corey and I came to introduce ourselves as a couple, Kristen opposed us. She said that we were not welcome, that our union was disgusting, and that we should never come back. We married despite her, and that's why she didn't come to our wedding. "What? Kristen told me she was sick during the wedding." "That's not true. Myra, what are you talking about? Stop lying." Trying to suppress her anger, Kristen spouts lies. I can't help but chuckle. I mean, come on, Kristen. You've got amnesia or something? You've made fun of me countless times. You even told me to my face that I'm ugly. You said that the baby I'm expecting will have my face. And you questioned if Corey could raise such a child. Forgotten all that? Ronald, everything Myra is saying is a complete lie. What are you talking about, Myra? Stop saying stupid stuff. Kristen, just so you don't forget, let me remind you. I will never enter this house, and I will never forget what you've said to me. Kristen looks at me with cold eyes and forcibly grabs my hand. Enough of this nonsense! Even Ronald is losing patience. Let's get inside. Corey and Ronald release my hand from Kristen's forceful grip. Ronald? Kristen falls flat on her butt, looking dazed. Her pretty dress is now soiled with dirt. Ronald doesn't offer her a hand and just looks down at her. Is what Myra's saying true? It's a lie, all lies. Myra has a problem with making stuff up, right, Corey? Kristen almost threatens with her tone, but Corey sighs. Sis, you're embarrassing yourself. What Myra is saying is true. If you're thinking of marrying Ronald, you better acknowledge this aspect of yourself. Upon hearing Corey's words, Ronald pauses for a moment and then starts walking towards the car. Wait! Ronald! Kristen chases after Ronald in her dirt-covered dress, but he won't let her into the car.
I may be overstepping by intervening in my brother's marriage, but I can't consider marrying someone who insults not just me, but even a child who isn't yet born. No offense to the family, but I'll be going home today. We'll talk some other time.
Don't say that! Please, Ronald!
Corey, Myra, thanks for letting me know about Kristen before we got married.
Ronald thanked us and drove away. Wait up! Kristen chased after the car, crying. Along the way, she stumbled and fell, continuing to cry. You'd think her own brother, Corey, would go to help, but instead, he takes my hand.
Let's go. I can't let someone who yanks a pregnant woman's hand around be in the same space as Myra.
As we walk back home, Kristen's cries linger for a while. After we get home, Corey contacts his parents-in-law. After being told to say our greetings, we stood at the front of the property and spilled the beans about the past. This led Corey to explain that Kristen and Ronald's engagement had probably fallen apart. My in-laws responded by saying, "It couldn't be helped." When they visited us later, I apologized for what I had done to Kristen, even if it was out of revenge. They told me, "Don't worry, what she did was true." According to my in-laws, Kristen had been shutting herself in her room ever since the engagement broke off. Ronald has a stable government job, and Kristen, who had thought she'd be living a stable life too, quit her job early on and is now unemployed. I heard she sneaks into the kitchen late at night to grab a meal as if she's stealing it, then goes back to her room, avoiding any contact with her parents. But Kristen is unpredictable. Both Corey and I have blocked Kristen's phone number. We moved to a bigger house since we have a baby on the way, and specifically asked my in-laws not to share our new address with Kristen. It seems like our decision was the right one. After we moved, Kristen went to our old place and began to bang and kick the front door, shouting, "Open up!" Because of her loud ruckus, a neighbor ended up reporting her to the police. It seemed like the in-laws were at their wits' end, dealing with Kristen, and after she caused some legal trouble, they kicked her out of their home. Regretting that they had spoiled Kristen, they gave her enough money to live on her own for a while. Since then, I've heard Kristen has been making ends meet in a small apartment with a part-time job. As for Corey and me, we welcomed a healthy, beautiful baby into the world. Just like Kristen said, our baby did look like me, and it was a very adorable little girl. Looking back at when Kristen opposed our marriage, I'm convinced that my unwavering decision to marry was the right one. Thanks to the courage I had back then to stand up to Kristen, I am now enjoying a happy life with a loving husband and a cute daughter.
Man, being a housewife must be great. You can nap whenever and you've got meals provided every day. If I could be reborn, I'd want to be a woman. Totally. Just like Mom, right? She's like a parasite. You're spot on. As I washed the dishes, my husband and son laughed and chatted like this behind me. So who do they think made the dinner they're enjoying? And who does the laundry? My name is Marcia. I live with my husband Cedric and our college-age son Davin. Every day, it seems, they label me a parasite, gossiping behind my back. Yes, currently I am unemployed and a housewife. However, there's a reason I became a housewife. Before marrying Cedric, I was an active professional, working hard in the corporate world. On the other hand, Cedric's job required frequent transfers and business trips, so he asked me to be a stay-at-home wife. I loved my job, but I quit to be with him. Becoming a housewife was the only option. His transfers always took us away from my parents' home. Raising a child in unfamiliar places was challenging, but still, we were a happy family. About 10 years after our wedding, when our son started elementary school, Cedric said, "The days of transfers are over. We'll be living near my parents' house now." Near your parents' house? Surprise came before joy. Yes, I requested to be stationed near home. It'll be easier for you and Davin, right? It will be, but settling in one place was indeed a relief, but the truth was hard for me to fully embrace. From the start of our marriage, my in-laws had never really approved of me. A wife should prioritize her husband after marriage. "We took you as our daughter-in-law, so you should serve us." Every time they opened their mouths, that's what I'd hear. Settle down, but now constantly summoned by in-laws. Get this, handle all the chores. They exploit me just because I'm a housewife. After enduring this for several months, my patience was at its limit. My in-laws treated me like a slave, and my husband wouldn't intervene. I grew to despise even seeing their faces and considered starting a part-time job. But then, while my in-laws were traveling, they got into an accident. While the other party was unharmed, my in-laws required care due to their injuries. Yet even in such circumstances, Cedric's nonchalant attitude remained unchanged. "Marcia, you're a housewife. You can look after my parents at home, can't you?" "What? What are you talking about?" Confused by my husband's words, I replied, "You want me to care for your parents? All by myself?" "What's the problem? Davin's in elementary school now. My parents said they want to be home. Housewives just lounge around all day, so you should naturally do this." "I've never done caregiving before, and handling both of them at once is—" "Stop making excuses. Who do you think has let you lead such a lazy life as a housewife up to now?" "Lounge around all day? Lazy? Remember, you wanted me to be a housewife. That's why I quit my job. I've been handling everything at home. How self-centered can you be?" If it weren't for our son, I would have surely filed for divorce. His words were that unbearable. In the end, I took up the task of caring for my in-laws. Though their bodies were frail, their minds were sharp. They took out their everyday frustrations on me. "Marcia, coffee. You really are an inconsiderate wife." "Oh, okay, right away." After one sip of the coffee I made, father-in-law abruptly threw the cup at me. "Who drinks coffee this lukewarm?" "Ah!" "You can't even make a decent cup of coffee, can you?" It wasn't just father-in-law who's overbearing. Mother-in-law was equally impossible to deal with. "Hey, Marcia, isn't the shower ready? I feel all sticky and gross." "Just a moment, please." "Never mind. Just wipe my back quickly. I can't reach." "Like this? Ouch!" "Oh, I'm sorry. You're so rough. Our son is unlucky to have such an incompetent wife." Naturally, talking to my husband didn't help. Instead, he'd casually say, "You're the wife. It's only natural to serve my parents." Caring for my in-laws became so routine that I began to feel numb. It was hard, but somehow my feelings became dulled. No matter how much they belittled me or threw things, I kept telling myself it would end someday. Just need to be patient until then. That's how I got through each day. Years later, due to the onset of dementia, the need for care for my in-laws increased, and it was decided they would be admitted to a care facility. The weight on my shoulders, having spent most of my days caring for them, had noticeably lessened. However, over these years, my husband and in-laws had consistently looked down on me, and unfortunately this attitude rubbed off on our son, Davin. Today, as always, Davin mocked me. "Mom, just because you're not taking care of Grandpa and Grandma anymore doesn't mean you get to slack off. I can't believe you're living off Dad's earnings and doing nothing." "Davin, well said," my husband chimed in, supporting our son's words. "I've been fed up with your thick-skinned attitude for a while now." "And by the way, when did you gain weight? Probably because you're eating full meals now that you're not caregiving. I noticed that too, but didn't have the heart to say it. The two of them openly insulted me. If I tried to leave the room, they'd just insult me louder so I could hear. Living this way daily, my stress had reached its breaking point. And then an incident pushed me past my limits. While I was doing the dishes after dinner, my husband and son started their usual chatter. Being a housewife must be nice. Napping any time and getting 3 meals a day. If I were to be reborn, I'd want to be a woman. Right? Mom's basically what you'd call a freeloader. Exactly. I swear if I ever get married, I don't want a freeloading wife like Mom. At that moment, I felt something snap inside me. Freeloader? Are you kidding me? Who do you think cooked the dinner you just ate? Who's doing these dishes? Who washes the clothes you wear and cleans the house you live in? I'll never forgive them. They've pushed me to this point, and I'll make sure they regret it. Determined to get my revenge, I began job hunting the next day. I didn't want to waste another moment on them, so I decided to work for my own future. Luckily, I quickly found a job that matched my qualifications. I used to be a nurse. I have a nursing license and plenty of experience, so finding a job was easy. Cedric should know I was a nurse. Did he not realize that with my qualifications I can easily find work? That evening, while my husband and son were having their usual conversation, I informed them, I've decided to start working from tomorrow. They first looked at me in shock, then snorted in laughter. What are you talking about? Who would hire a housewife like you? Exactly. No place would hire somebody as outdated as you, Mom. It's just part-time for a few hours, isn't it? What a waste of time. Just drop it. Mom, you can only do household chores. You should listen to what Dad says. Looking down on the two, I firmly replied, It's a full-time, permanent position, actually. What, full-time? Permanent? You got... Mom, they hired you as a permanent employee? Yes, so from now on, I'll be contributing half to our living expenses. In return, I'd like you to share the household chores. What? Housework is your job. That's right. That's what moms are supposed to do. Facing their outbursts, I landed the finishing blow. Oh, since when was housework a job? I've never received a paycheck. I thought being a housewife meant napping whenever and living leisurely. What? They grumbled endlessly, but I ignored it. The next day, I started working again. I only did the basic chores and dedicated the rest of my time to my job that I love. It was challenging after such a long break, but far more fulfilling than before. Ever since my husband and son started excessively praising me to get in my good graces. Cooking is tough. Wow, Marcia, you're incredible. I miss your cooking. Totally. No one can do laundry and cook like Mom. The best we can do is take out the trash. Thinking I'd be like, oh, well, all right then. I glanced at them and flatly said, Excuse me, I'm working too, you know. How about doing your laundry and preparing your meals? What? How dare you speak to me like that? We can't live without my income. Excuse me? That's not true at all. What? Turns out my salary is almost the same as my husband's. In fact, since I work at a large hospital, I earn slightly more. Speechless, my husband became more docile. But now my recently employed son tried to exploit the situation. Hey, since you're earning too, I don't need to chip in, right? With my husband nodding in agreement, he added, Right, actually, let's just have Marcia pay for everything. You were the one who said we could live without my money. Great idea, Dad. More allowance for us. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Tired of their childish banter, I said, All right then, both of you will handle all the chores and manage the finances within what I contribute. Why would it come to that? You're still a housewife. Dad's right. We're already doing our laundry. I might be a housewife, but first I'm a person. I'm not your maid. You! It was because of me that you even got to work. Exactly. All this time you've been relying on Dad, now you act so high and mighty. Then my husband slowly pulled out divorce papers from his bag. He slammed them on the table in front of me. I stared at the papers and asked quietly, What's this? You can't see, can't you? Divorce papers. I've filled in my part. We can get divorced whenever. Got it? So, you want a divorce? I didn't say that. You don't want to divorce me either, do you? I'll give you 1 day to think, cool down, and decide what's best for you. Okay. As I began to pack my things, I could see my husband and son smirking. Hey, where do you think you're going? I turned and answered, I'll stay at a business hotel near work for a while. Fine, cool off there for a bit. And so I headed to the business hotel. I didn't have any intention of going back to that house. After checking in, I went directly to work from the hotel the next day. This continued for a few days. One evening, while relaxing with a drink, I got a call from my husband. Marcia, have you decided? Davin's here too. Come home and cook dinner. I've made up my mind, but I won't be coming back. What? What are you talking about? Your son and husband are hungry and waiting. Can't you even care for your family? We're not family anymore. He seemed unable to comprehend and uttered a dumbfounded, What? Thanks for the divorce papers. I've already submitted them. What did you say? You filed for divorce? This is a joke, right? A joke? Who would joke about something like this? We're now complete strangers. What are you saying? You're acting so selfish. What about Davin? He's about to graduate from college. He'll be fine on his own. He's already secured a job. You're abandoning your family? Goodbye. Hey, wait a... I hung up. The calls from him kept coming. I got fed up and blocked his number. I told my parents about the situation and asked them not to answer his calls. Seeing this opportunity, I decided to move back to my parents. Luckily, there was a branch of my workplace near my parents' home. I asked my boss and managed to transfer there. Now I rent a condo near my workplace and parents' home, and I'm working full-time, just like before. Being a full-time nurse is always busy. Having my workplace nearby is super convenient. On my days off, I visit my parents and spend more time with them. Marcia, you're always welcome to come over. You've been pushing through all this while. Thanks, Dad, Mom. Dad and Mom said, comforting me. On the other hand, my ex-husband and son, unable to keep up with the daily chores, their house has now reportedly become a complete mess. A week after I left, I received a message on WhatsApp from my son. Mom, we can't handle it without you. We can't bear living like this anymore. Dad and I are at our wits' end. Please help us, Mom. The picture my son sent was truly appalling. A mountain of empty takeout containers indicating they haven't been cooking, garbage bags scattered everywhere alongside piles of laundry, floors accumulating thick layers of dust, and so on. The dirtiness was incomparable to before. I simply replied to my son, I hope you find your parasite soon. That message must have struck a nerve, as I haven't heard from him since. I have no regrets now. I did all I could and made every possible effort to maintain the family relationship. But if they're going to look down on me that much, I'd rather distance myself from such a family. Going forward in life, I want to indulge myself. Having held back for so long, I'm determined to live a happy life.
You won't believe how much it's burning.
In a message that seemed like someone else's problem, Lisa, my sister-in-law, sent an image of a house engulfed in flames. Our house.
Why can't you even laugh about this? You've set someone's home on fire.
Lisa, this is crossing a line.
From the looks of it, Lisa had been drinking again. The photo she sent showed a house blazing up in flames. As Thomas and I trembled in anger, Lisa was seen laughing joyfully in the background. I was about to scream in fury when something weird caught my attention. This happened several months ago. My name is Nancy. I'm newly married to Thomas. We were living peacefully and considering having children. After a premarital health check, we found out that it would be difficult for me to conceive. I was scared. Thomas might resent me, but he assured me a life with just the two of us will be fulfilling too, and I was moved to tears. We decided to continue infertility treatment for a while, and if it didn't work, we'd come to terms with it. Except one issue troubled our peaceful daily life. That issue was Lisa, Thomas' sister.
Lisa is 3 years older than me and is Thomas' sister. While Thomas is incredibly earnest, Lisa is quite the free spirit. Her personality was the cause of their downfall. Lisa, whom I've never met, got divorced. Now, she's living with her parents-in-law near our house along with her 2 kids. Since their house is close to ours, we occasionally go out to eat together or share some homemade dishes. But every time Lisa sees me, she makes snide comments. My husband Thomas had told his parents that I have fertility issues. It was out of concern for me, so I wouldn't be constantly questioned about grandchildren. His parents are very kind people. My mother-in-law, Margaret, even said, "I've heard fertility treatments are tough. Don't push yourself too hard." However, Lisa, who overheard this, would harass me every time we met. She would go on and on about how challenging parenting is. Then she'd always add,
Well, it's a struggle you'll never understand, Nancy. You have fertility issues, after all. Good luck with your treatments.
She'd say it as if she was mocking me. At first, I was shocked, but as she continued saying it, my annoyance turned into anger. Convinced that this woman had no common sense, I decided to just brush off whatever Lisa said. If I had taken her comments head on, I probably would have ended up yelling at Lisa every time we met. What was even more troubling was her asking us for money. Thomas and I both work, and we're financially stable. We had even bought a new house. Once Lisa realized this, she started asking for money. We politely declined each time, but then she would say things like,
You're so stingy. People with money are always so cheap. It's not like you have kids to spend on.
And she didn't stop there. Now, she started coming to our house without any appointments.
It's kind of hot out. Let me have some lemonade.
She'd say, barging right in. And whenever Lisa left, something was always missing. When I confronted Lisa, she would simply say,
I don't know.
I was convinced Lisa was the one taking things, but I had no proof. Even when I told her to leave, I wasn't strong enough to physically remove her. Lisa's audacity was off the charts. I couldn't help but wonder how Thomas and Lisa, raised by the same parents, could be so different. Once our new home was built, we'd be farther away from my in-laws. I kept telling myself to be patient until then. But even after we moved, Lisa showed up unannounced. I had never given Lisa our address, so when I asked, "How did you find out where we live?" Lisa nonchalantly replied,
I found a note Mom had written.
I could only sigh at Lisa's clinginess. She looked around the house and said,
You guys are definitely wealthy. Thomas works for a good company, and Nancy, you have a decent job too, right? I'm so jealous.
Before plopping herself on the couch like she owned the place. Sitting there like a queen, Lisa asked,
Make some coffee, will you?
Realizing she intended to stay, I said, I wasn't expecting you, so we don't have any coffee. Please leave.
No coffee? Fine. Water will do.
Lisa laughed, then suddenly looked at our yard. The spacious yard was our favorite part of the house. We had talked about playing there with our future kids when we decided to buy the place. Staring at the yard, Lisa looked at me and excitedly said,
Oh, that's right. Why don't we call my kids and their friends and have a barbecue here? It would be fun, right?
What?
It'll be a blast. We'll barbecue in the evening and light sparklers at night. The adults can enjoy some drinks. Come on, it will be fun.
Oh no, thank you. Faced with my blunt refusal, Lisa looked annoyed.
Oh, Nancy, you're always so irritable. At this rate, I'm not inviting you to the barbecue or to play with sparklers.
I wonder who Lisa thinks is making me irritable. Either way, barbecue and sparklers are absolutely out of the question. Please leave. Lisa kept insisting on having a barbecue and using sparklers, but she eventually left when she saw I was standing firm against it. Typically pushy Lisa. I had a bad feeling something might happen. Weeks later, Thomas and I went on our belated honeymoon. Due to work commitments, this was the only time we could both take off. We toured tourist spots at our destination and returned to our hotel as the sun set. Just when we were enjoying a lovely dinner, my phone rang. The screen displayed Lisa. Assuming she was calling for money or something, I reluctantly answered, "Hello?"
Hey, just wanted to let you know we're barbecuing in your backyard.
What backyard you are talking about?
Yours and Thomas, of course. You know, I mentioned wanting to barbecue and use sparklers.
I was flabbergasted. Despite my explicit refusal, she had taken advantage of our absence to barge in and have a barbecue and sparklers. I told you, it's not okay. That's trespassing.
Trespassing? Come on, it's my brother's place. That doesn't matter.
Lisa seemed tipsy. Her speech was slurred, and she didn't appear to understand anything I was saying.
Well then, we'll enjoy ourselves.
And she hung up. I reported this to Thomas, and we both tried to contact Lisa, urging her to leave, but got no response. All we could do was spend the night praying her home would be safe. The next day, while heading home after cutting our trip short, we received a call from Lisa as we entered our local town. Hello? Lisa? Why didn't you answer the phone yesterday? We were worried.
Well, you see...
Lisa hesitated, then blurted out something shocking.
Sorry, there was a fire.
What? I put the call on speakerphone so Thomas and I could both hear. Another reason was to record a conversation with Lisa. Apparently, Lisa and the others had a barbecue and were playing with sparklers as planned. Although they assumed it would be fine because many adults were present, all the adults were drunk. In their absence, Lisa's kids started the fire as a prank. By the time they realized it, our house was already burning. Lisa sent pictures.
See how well it's burning? So shocking.
Lisa said as if it were someone else's problem. She still seemed to be drinking.
How can you laugh about this? You burned down someone's home!
Lisa, this is beyond unacceptable. The image sent by a drunken Lisa showed our home going up in flames. While Thomas and I fumed with anger, Lisa looks amused, grinning from ear to ear. I'm about to let out a yell when something odd occurs to me. Shouldn't the fire department call if your house is on fire? No call came, so we take a closer look at the photo. This isn't our house!
Huh?
Ignoring Lisa's bewildered response, I say to Thomas, "Look closely," and show him the photo. Thomas examines the photo and mutters, "You're right."
No way. I definitely went into your house.
Are you sure you didn't mix it up? Like, not checking the house number sign? At this, Lisa clams up. Our neighborhood has houses that look similar. Lisa has only been to our house once. Chances are, Lisa broke into our neighbor's house by mistake. At this dreadful thought, not just Thomas and I, but even Lisa goes silent for a moment.
What should I do? This is a joke, right?
It's no joke. We don't have that tree in our yard.
I'm pretty sure it's the neighbor's house.
Oh no. Am I going to get arrested?
Ignoring Lisa's panic rumbles, we hang up and rush home to verify the facts. When we get home, sure enough, our house is intact while the neighbor's is burned to the ground. Our neighbors look distressed. Seeing us, they hurry over and apologize. They think their house was deliberately set on fire. They were away on a trip and rushed back home after receiving a call from the fire department. As I'm about to mention Lisa, her car screeches to a halt in front of our house. She pulls us aside and pleads,
If you guys keep quiet, no one will know. Don't say anything to the neighbors. Having a family member arrested would be embarrassing for you and Thomas. Just keep quiet and it won't come out.
Thomas and I lock eyes. We both nod firmly and grab Lisa's arms, presenting her to the neighbors. The arsonist is this woman's child.
Why would you say that? There's no proof.
We have proof,
Thomas says, pulling out his mobile phone. We had not only listened to Lisa's call on speakerphone, but also recorded it. We never imagined the recording would serve as evidence for arson. Lisa had even mentioned she'd been drinking, implicating her for DUI. The recording clearly revealed that her child set the fire, constituting solid evidence. The neighbors' faces turn red with rage. A flustered Lisa tries to deny.
That voice isn't mine.
The neighbors point to their yard.
We have security cameras in our yard. Even if you deny it, evidence will emerge. You'll pay for this.
As they declare this, Lisa collapses, power draining from her body, and starts crying loudly, but without ever apologizing until the end. After that incident, Lisa was taken away by the police that our neighbors had called. Apparently, she faced fines for trespassing, drunk driving, and even for the small fire set by the kids. On top of that, she was being billed for damages to our neighbors' property and their home repairs. Altogether, the sum she owed skyrocketed to $30,000. With no money to her name, Lisa first turned to parent-in-law for help. Up until now, parent-in-law had occasionally lent Lisa money when she was in a bind, but this time, parent-in-law flat out refused. Regretting years of indulgence, parents-in-law announced that they were severing ties with Lisa. Lisa's kids were deemed unfit to be in her care, and their custody was transferred to her ex-husband. Desperate, Lisa came to us for help, but there was no way we were aiding her. For all we knew, it could have been our house that got torched. Neither Thomas nor I are pushovers willing to help such a person. Mom-in-law had even called us to say, if Lisa comes to you for help, you don't have to assist her. Thomas agreed, declaring he wanted nothing to do with Lisa going forward. Lisa, now abandoned by her children, her parents, and her brother and sister-in-law, was truly alone. She borrowed money from various places to pay her dues, some of which seemed to be shady outfits. For a while, Lisa kept sending desperate messages like,
Can you lend me some money? Just a little would help. Please help me out.
But then one day, her messages stopped coming altogether. Rumor has it she's now working around the clock to pay off her endless debt. It's a harsh world, but people like Lisa may just need that kind of reality check. Thomas and I finally found peace when Lisa stopped coming around. We no longer have to deal with unexpected visits or monetary demands. Life felt exceptionally tranquil. The neighbors rebuilt their home quickly. When we went to apologize, they warmly told us,
It's not your fault. Let's continue to be friends.
And greeted us with smiles. It was a huge relief as we had worried our relationship would sour due to the incident. Adding to our happiness, I found out that my fertility treatment was successful and we're expecting our first child. Our neighbors also got pregnant around the same time, and our babies are due close to each other, deepening our bond even more. As we discussed our kids playing together someday, our neighbors jokingly said,
Barbecues and sparklers are off limits though.
We all burst into laughter.
My name is Samantha. Just the other day, my boyfriend Michael proposed to me. Standing in front of a beautifully lit fountain, I was deeply moved when Michael got down on one knee and offered me an engagement ring.
Please, marry me. I promise to make you happy.
I tearfully accepted the ring and said yes to Michael, who assured me happiness. Indeed, Michael said,
I promise to make you happy.
But that's all words. A shocking event unfolded just a week before our wedding. Up until then, everything had been peaceful. Family meetings had gone smoothly. Both our parents got along well, which was a big relief for me. However, Amelia, Michael's sister-in-law, always greeted me with a tight smile. That had me concerned. Michael and I planned to get our marriage certificate issued after the wedding. We wanted to do it on our anniversary, but we were set to start living together a week before the wedding. My in-laws are farmers and own extensive land in the countryside. We were going to build our new home just a few minutes away from where my in-laws and brother and sister-in-law live on the property. Though I felt a bit guilty about having a new home built, my mother-in-law said kindly, "As long as you help with the farming, it's all good." I studied agriculture in college. I have always had an interest in farming and was looking forward to joining the family business. Even before we got married, I would frequently help out, and the in-laws always welcomed me. Initially, I was worried about starting our married life on the in-laws' property, but I felt that we could live harmoniously with them. But one day, while I was helping with the farming as usual, Amelia approached me discreetly and whispered, "Be careful of your father-in-law." Caught off guard, all I could say was, "Huh?" Amelia looked like she wanted to say more, but our conversation was cut short as my father-in-law called out to us from a distance, leaving me puzzled about why she said that. With just a week left until the wedding, everything was set and all that remained was to walk down the aisle. I packed my things and moved into our new home to start living with Michael. We rented a truck, loaded it with our belongings, and headed to our new place with my dad helping us move. I had come to help with the farming, but today was the first day we were going to our newly built home. Dad and I couldn't help but tilt our heads in confusion as we stood in front of it. It seemed like someone was already living in the home that was supposed to be for Michael and me. The door was unlocked, so we gently opened it to find shoes lined up in the entryway. Confused by the obvious signs that someone was living there, Dad and I decided to go greet my in-laws before starting the moving process. When we rang the doorbell, a troubled-looking Michael came out. We told him it looked like someone was living in our new home, to which Michael replied, something was definitely off. And as we puzzled over it, father-in-law appeared saying, sorry about that. Without prior notice, we have decided Michael and Samantha will live here. Could you move your stuff in? We moved David and Amelia to the new house. David and Amelia are my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. Suddenly I remembered what Amelia had warned me about, to watch out for father-in-law. I couldn't help but blurt out, "This is a problem." I was planning on starting our new life in that house. I wasn't informed that I would be living with father-in-law and mother-in-law. Why didn't Michael tell me? Seeing Michael hesitate only fueled my growing irritation. From his behavior, it was clear Michael knew we would be living together all along. Keeping that a secret until moving day was absolutely unacceptable. Father-in-law, seemingly displeased by my reaction, said, "If you're married, it shouldn't matter if you live together or apart." Although I had intended to help with the farm and didn't object to living on the same property as my in-laws, living together was another matter entirely. Living together or apart are completely different matters, I countered. Dad backed me up. "It feels like you're taking our daughter for granted by informing us after the fact on such an important matter. We would like a proper explanation." Confronted by Dad's firm stance, father-in-law reluctantly answered,
Well, you understand, don't you? It's better to have a young wife at home. Amelia has passed 30, entering middle age. Just having a young girl like Samantha around invigorates me. That's why we chose to live with Samantha and send the older wife to the new house.
Dad and I were at a loss for words. Father-in-law's comment suggested he viewed his son's wife merely as a woman. The audacity of father-in-law who talked as if he was saying something entirely reasonable was frightening. Michael, was it because I'm young that we're living in this house? I looked to Michael for some relief, but he stayed silent. Whether he was uncomfortable or what, he bit his lip and didn't say a word. That's when Amelia showed up. Samantha, hi there. Amelia, her face smudged with dirt as if she had been doing some farming, looked at me intently. You might want to leave today. Living in a home where you're not welcome is just torturous.
What's your problem? You're just the wife, yet you talk back so sassily? You used to be so cute, but you have lost your charm lately.
Father-in-law was furious at Amelia's words. Michael stood there silently observing the tension. Creeped out by the whole scene, I told Dad, let's go. Dad agreed to leave for the day. Michael and I decided to have a serious talk tomorrow. Back at my parents' home, I wept in my bed for a while. Why did this have to happen? I felt so devastated. I couldn't imagine being happy, marrying Michael who just followed his father's whims. While pondering what to say to Michael tomorrow, I received a phone call. I didn't recognize the number, but I decided to take the leap and answer. It's Amelia. A familiar voice echoed. Amelia, thank you for today. I'm sorry for calling you so suddenly. I found your number on Michael's phone without his permission, so please keep this call a secret from him. My body tensed up as I wondered what Amelia had to risk so much to tell me. Then Amelia started saying something shocking. I have been wanting to tell you this but never got the chance. I apologize for it coming so last minute before your wedding. I highly discourage you from marrying Michael. The information Amelia shared was jarring. She said that she and her husband had been living with the in-laws, but were kicked out as soon as they learned I was moving in. According to father-in-law, it's because he wants to live with a younger woman. Father-in-law has a thing for younger women and he has cheated on mother-in-law, causing her emotional pain for years. Apparently, father-in-law has even intentionally walked into the changing room after Amelia took a bath saying, "Oops, my bad," with a lecherous grin. He had broken the lock himself and claimed it was an accident, but Amelia knew better. He had also rummaged through their bedroom under the pretense of cleaning and uncomfortably clung to Amelia while she cooked. Amelia was deeply in love with her husband David, and they have children, so she had been hesitant. But being kicked out this time solidified her decision to divorce. After hearing all this, there's no way I could proceed with the marriage. Amelia and I made a pact to take revenge on Michael, David, and father-in-law. I arrived at my in-laws the next day and was greeted by Amelia. We nodded at each other and entered the house where Michael, David, and my in-laws had gathered for a discussion. Thank you all for coming, I started, locking eyes with Michael. Let's call off the engagement. A stunned Michael listened as I continued. You promised to make me happy, Michael. Yet you're fine with me living with this father-in-law? That's allowing me to suffer, right? I won't marry a man who's still controlled by his parents. You changed our housing plans without consulting me. So you are paying the cancellation fees for the wedding. Huh? Michael yelled in anger, but father-in-law was even more furious.
What do you mean by this father-in-law? What don't you like about me?
Don't Michael and David know? Both averted their eyes amidst the awkward silence. Amelia calmly recounted what father-in-law had done to her. Both Michael and David knew about father-in-law's invasive behavior, like spying on her in the changing room or rummaging through their bedroom. All this done without mother-in-law's knowledge. Mother-in-law's face gradually reddened as Amelia unveiled father-in-law's actions. Seeking support, father-in-law turned to his sons.
I didn't do any of that, right?
Cornered by mother-in-law, Michael and David looked down, essentially confirming it. What the heck? You did that to your daughter-in-law? That's repulsive. Unbelievable.
I didn't.
So the engagement is off. Clearly, you won't protect me. Seeing what Amelia has endured, living with father-in-law is unacceptable. While an infuriated mother-in-law launched at father-in-law, I told Michael so. Michael stayed quiet, seemingly admitting the only option was to break off the engagement. Beside me, Amelia handed David pre-filled divorce papers. David, who had been pitying Michael and father-in-law until now, was shocked by the papers.
Why all of a sudden?
He stammered. You never stood up for me. If I kept thinking about what father-in-law might do to our daughter, I couldn't continue living with you. Please, let's get divorced, Amelia said. David stared at the divorce papers, his hands trembling. Large tears dropped from his eyes, but Amelia was unwavering. I have extras if you make a mistake, she said, handing him a pen, which he took while still crying. Caught between his brother's tears and their parents' major blow-up, Michael must have been struggling too.
I really love Samantha. I knew Dad was a womanizer, but going against him wasn't an option, especially in this small town.
I can forgive you for making decisions behind my back, favoring your father over me. No matter what Michael says, I have made up my mind to break off the engagement. Our parents are furious at Michael, so there is no going back now. Michael seemed devastated.
Is that so?
He wiped away a tear from his eyes. Being in the same space with a sobbing brother and a feuding couple felt like hell on earth. After Amelia got David to draft the divorce papers, we headed to our new place. I looked after her daughter while Amelia packed up her stuff. She plans to file for divorce today and head back to her parents' home with her daughter. Thank you so much for helping me dodge a bullet with that family. No worries, I wish I had told you sooner. We both chose the wrong men. But let's make sure we're happy from here on out. Amelia, who always seems so cool, had a charming smile. After watching Amelia walk away, hand in hand with her cheerful daughter, I returned to my family home. Later, I made sure Michael paid for the wedding cancellation fees. He seemed fully aware of his wrongdoings and paid without any resistance, which I appreciated. Michael's family lived in a rural area where gossip is the wife's main form of entertainment. Naturally, Michael's family became the target of good gossip. After all that fuss, even his mom ended up divorcing his dad. Their family became infamous as the household both sons' fiancés ran away from. Since I work in agriculture, I sometimes hear rumors about Michael's family. After his mom left, his dad drowned his sorrows in alcohol. The farm work, once shared between his parents, Michael, David, and Amelia, is now solely on Michael and David. They had to scale down their large farm because they couldn't manage it anymore. Though I was initially upset about breaking off the engagement with Michael, I have recovered now. I'm not interested in dating or marrying for a while, just focusing on work and my hobbies. Thinking back, I am relieved I didn't become part of that family, and I'm forever grateful to Amelia.
I always thought I'd have it all. A big house, a dependable husband, loving kids, and a kind-hearted mother-in-law. I'm Lilu, a stay-at-home mom. I married Eden, my college sweetheart. We knew going in that we'd be living with his parents. But then my mother-in-law passed away with death, and my mother-in-law's health deteriorated. We had to sell their property to settle those debts. Eden has a sister, but we kept 80% of the money from the sale to take care of my mother-in-law. So we built a 5-bedroom house for us, our 2 kids, and my mother-in-law. I'm sorry you've had to go through all this trouble for me. Taking care of my bedridden mother-in-law was challenging, but her gratitude made it bearable. Thanks for always being there. Why don't you take some time off today? I'll take over. Eden also pitches in with housework and childcare, which gives me some time to myself. Then one day, my divorced sister-in-law moved in. She had been living with a guy who had a gambling problem. He'd borrow money from people and let them take advantage of her. This left her with PTSD and a fear of men. She's getting treatment now. She's a single mom with 2 kids, and we can't just turn our backs on her. I feel so sorry for her. She should stay with us for a while. Thank you, Lilu. We agreed she could stay for a year to heal and become independent. But 2 years have passed. My once humble sister-in-law has grown rather arrogant. We initially didn't ask her for money, but Eden finally told her to contribute $300 a month, which she does. Even so, $300 for her and her 2 kids is hardly enough. And she started to act like she owns the place. For example, we have a rule about doing our own laundry, but she puts hers in our basket. I decided it was time to set things straight. Please follow the rules. Your contribution isn't enough, and you've overstayed your welcome. Can you please move out? Well, this is basically my family home. Maybe it's because she inherited 80% of the sale of her parents' property, and her mother lives here, but she acts like this is her home. Nowadays, I'm not just stuck with housework, but also picking up sister-in-law's kids from daycare. On top of that, sister-in-law's son treats my daughter like she's an inconvenience. I can't even spend quality time with my own child because of this situation. The amount of housework has increased, and I even have to provide care for the elderly. The comment that surprised me the most was, "You're amazing for even handling their bathroom needs. I couldn't do it." I'm honestly at my limit. I'm overwhelmed with all these responsibilities. I might reach my breaking point. It's too much to ignore. It's been over a year since our deadline passed. Our finances are strained, too. I've repeatedly told her to leave, but it hasn't had any impact. I'll have a talk with her as well. Thank you. From the next day on, I ignore sister-in-law family's laundry. Feeling a bit guilty, I also start making smaller portions for meals and even add less care into it. What the heck? Why is there so little food? We're barely getting rent from you, so I'm cutting back. Sister-in-law complained to Eden. Eden, don't you think this is horrible? Not at all. Shouldn't you just be grateful that food is being made for you? Over time, things revert back to the way they were. Lilu, can you do this for me? Sis, become independent. Do it yourself. Don't rely on Lilu. If you won't do your part, leave. I do contribute to the household expenses, so what's the big deal? No way that covers it. If you want to stay, you need to ask my wife to extend your stay and contribute a reasonable amount. Sister-in-law left for her part-time job without saying a word. I'm sorry, Lilu. Can we talk a little now? How about the 3 of us, including Mom, have a conversation? So the 3 of us gathered in mother-in-law's room, and I started speaking. It was something I had been mentally preparing for. Lately, I've been feeling so stressed that I can't properly interact with my daughter. I even find myself yelling at her out of frustration. I'm also concerned about how my daughter is being treated like a burden by sister-in-law. I don't feel comfortable in my own home anymore, and it seems like that will continue. If sister-in-law and her family don't move out within 2 months, I'm considering renting an apartment for me and my daughter for our own well-being. I might even contemplate divorce. I'm really sorry for letting things get to this point. All of the burden has been falling on Lilu, and I knew she was getting stressed out. I'm not happy with the current situation either, but I didn't know how to ask my sister to move out. I knew that Eden wasn't taking this lightly either. I've been talking to my friends about what to do, and I thought maybe I should just toss out all of my sister's stuff and change the locks. But then I was warned that could lead to legal issues, so I was confused about what to do. I see. Considering the past and our divorce, I initially thought living together wouldn't be too bad. But now it seems like the only option is to ask her to move out. Yeah, it's becoming a toxic environment for the family. But how do we deal with my stubborn sister, who refuses to leave? At that moment, my mother-in-law, who had been silent, spoke up. Lilu, I'm sorry for causing you trouble when you're even taking care of me. Could you ask my daughter to come to my room when she gets home today? Of course. I'm not sure what she's going to say, but she probably wants her to move out. It feels like something's starting to change because I've shown strong resolve. We'll see what happens, but I need to stay strong and not let my emotions get the best of me. The first step is to change my attitude and actions. After asking my sister-in-law to go to my mother-in-law's room when she got home from her part-time job, I told her I wouldn't be cooking dinner anymore, starting tomorrow. She glanced at me and headed to my mother-in-law's room. A little while later, I could hear her raising her voice inside the room. Eden and I were contemplating entering the room when she came out quietly, but walked back to her room with a heavy step. Mom, are you okay? I'm fine. Sorry for making you worry, but I don't think my words resonated with her. I don't think that's true. I'm sure she's got something to think about. Let's take this opportunity to cooperate as a trio. From that day on, we increased our talks as a trio and became more assertive in our words and attitudes. We frequently told her that we wanted her to move out, didn't take on any imposed housework or babysitting, and during our discussions, we decided on specific conditions for her departure. Then a meeting was held, including her. She sat there, knowing what was to be discussed, with an impatient look. Eden began speaking. Sis, we've told you repeatedly that we've reached our limit. Our finances are strained. Please leave within a month. A month? That's impossible. How long do you think we've waited? Fine, I'll increase the living expenses to $500. That should be enough, right? She looked like she couldn't care less. No, it's not nearly enough. Like I've said before, if you want to stay here, first agree to our terms, and then apologize to Lilu for causing her trouble. This isn't your home. It's the home of me, Lilu, and our children. Let's make that clear, so there's no misunderstanding. What? Isn't that too harsh? You think you're having it tough? We've been covering your daycare costs for Lilu for a whole year, and you still want to milk us for more? Fine, let me ask you this. If $500 isn't enough, how much would make you happy? Sister-in-law still won't back down. How can she say this stuff with a straight face? To be frank, even if you were to start helping around the house, $500 is nowhere near enough if you're going to continue freeloading. We'd need at least $1,000. You're scamming us. I nearly blurted out. That's rich coming from you. If you don't move out within a month, we'll consider legal action. We don't care where you go, but you've been warned. You need to be out in a month. Finally, it seemed Eden's words hit home. Sister-in-law was silent for a moment and then caved in. Fine, I get it. Are you sure? I'll start looking for a place tomorrow. If you don't move out, we'll put your stuff outside and change the locks. Sister-in-law nodded and hurried out of the room. After that, Eden took a hard line. If he came home and found sister-in-law there, he'd throw her and her stuff out, only for her to sneak back in. We started charging her for using our amenities, like the toilet, shower, kitchen, water, and TV. If her kid ever wronged our daughter, we'd lock her kid out on the balcony. Even my normally calm mother-in-law was yelling at her to leave. Eventually, sister-in-law stopped asking me for favors and quickly found a place to move, perhaps due to the hostile environment. Considering what her ex-husband did to her, it's hard not to sympathize. But isn't standing on her own 2 feet the best thing for her? I was relieved. Then she finally moved out just before the deadline. But that relief was short-lived. A week after she left, an unexpected turn of events took place. Sister-in-law collapsed due to mental health issues. Being alone with her child seemed to have triggered past traumas. Doctors said it's risky for her to live alone with her child. Though sister-in-law acknowledged that her eviction was a result of her own actions, she still wished for a life of dependency, like before her marriage. Is it cold of me to think that her character, one of dependence on others, was the root cause of her collapse? Since sister-in-law's collapse, Eden and mother-in-law have had several discussions. Seeing them like this makes me anxious. Am I being left out of the loop, despite being the one burdened the most? Depending on how things go, I might need to think about my next moves. If we end up taking sister-in-law back, should we consider a trial cohabitation, or even think about divorce? While I've been thrown for a loop by this situation, Eden seems to be in disarray as well. I'm really sorry, Lilu. Can you give me a couple days to sort things out? Sure, I'm confused too. Let's both take some time to think. Eventually, I joined the discussion once we had both calmed down. I hope they don't think it's up to me to put up with this situation alone. While that did cross my mind, Eden seemed deeply engaged in conversation with a doctor, discussing options for a scenario that would work for everyone, including his sister-in-law. He doesn't seem eager to back out. I made it clear that even short-term cohabitation is out of the question for me. Finally, Eden and his mother-in-law proposed. Could we have sister-in-law stay at the house until the end of the year? It's July now. That's a whole 5 months away. According to Eden, he did check with social services about available shelter for mothers and children, an option the doctor also suggested. However, immediate placement isn't possible. Because she has family, her case isn't considered urgent, so priority placement isn't an option either. But if the doctor says it's unsafe for her to live alone with her kids, what can we do but wait for shelter availability? Leaving her be and then being held responsible is also problematic. The shelter seems to be the best option. I worry, however, that if we allow her back, even temporarily, sister-in-law might take advantage and overstay. Truth be told, she did manage to move out last time within the deadline, but even though she was ready to move, she kept dragging her feet, not budging until the very last moment. Considering that, it might be tough to get her to leave again. Look, my sister is in a tough situation. Lilu, you've been more than generous, and for her to repay us this way, she's not my sister anymore. Next time, she'll have to leave, and the shelter should alleviate most concerns. Eden laid out conditions until she can enter the shelter. Sister-in-law will handle all cleaning and post-meal chores, help mother-in-law with her nighttime needs and bath. She will pay combined rent and food cost of $800. We won't take care of sister-in-law's kids at all. I wonder if these terms are even feasible. Will they hold up? Concerns remain, but we call sister-in-law to discuss the shelter. The doctor also thinks it's best for you to go to the shelter and aim for independence. If you're worried about living alone with your kids, it's a good option. I thoroughly explained the shelter, thinking sister-in-law would agree. Instead, she objected. No way. Apparently, she dislikes that the individual rooms in the shelter don't have baths, and she doesn't want to share washing machines. Eden was furious. You're in no position to be picky. You can't stay here, so be grateful for a good solution that lets you live decently. But I still don't like it. At this rate, she'll keep complaining and stay put. Eden says he'll make sure she goes to the shelter, but isn't he underestimating the burden this will place on me? I get that he's not doing anything, and I know there are no other options left, but I can't take it anymore. The next day, I quickly made arrangements, packed our bags, and left the house with my daughter, leaving to protect myself and my daughter. I wrote in a note as I left. Just as I stepped out, as expected, sister-in-law came back and looked already distressed. She's been calling me non-stop. Our home is a mess! I thought you'd be here, Lilu! What's the point if you're not? It would be a heartwarming scene in a romance drama to hear, it's meaningless without you. But this is reality. You're reaping what you sowed by not becoming independent. If we divorce, it's on you. Take care of mother-in-law. I was firm. She cried loudly, but I didn't care. I've received several calls from Eden and mother-in-law, begging me to return. Please, Lilu, come back. I have zero intention of coming back, as long as sister-in-law is there. Kick her out, or I'll demand alimony during the divorce trial. We'll have to sell the house then. Even I think I'm being cold. It hurts, but it's the only way to protect what matters to me. It's a good opportunity to make them realize how much they rely on me. Since leaving the house, despite my fears, it's been meaningful to spend one-on-one time with my daughter. Eden has been contacting me daily. He told me that sister-in-law wasn't lifting a finger at home, that the caregiving was a mess, and he had to take off work to handle things. Eventually, he kicked her out. Receiving that message, a part of me is torn about whether to go back or not. Lilu and the kids are my top priority. I want us all to live together. I'm taking care of Mom myself right now, but it's affecting my job. I'm thinking about hiring a helper. However, that's not financially sustainable in the long run. You might have to work part-time. We can't put Mom in a facility immediately, and even if we do, it's going to be expensive. I agreed to live with your mom and take care of her when we got married, and I'll continue to do so. Your mom's been good to me too. But your sister will be back. She always is. She's returned home within a week before, so I want to watch the situation for at least a month. Understood. I'll hire a helper for 1 month. If Mom can move into a mother-child home soon, that would solve everything. Even though the doctor recommends it, the welfare officer won't consider it. They say it's too cruel to kick her out. I'll talk to them again. Thank you. After that, the sister-in-law comes back to our home yet again. Despite Eden's constant visits to the welfare office, the officer is only sympathetic. The situation is not improving. The stress and sleeplessness it causes me enrages Eden, who begins ignoring both his sister and her child. He confronts the welfare officer multiple times. My wife is sick because of my sister. We're even discussing divorce. If our family falls apart, it's partly your fault too. If you think she's so pitiful, why don't you adopt her? Between the stress about his sister, the uproar, the fatigue from a busy work period, and caregiving, Eden ends up in the hospital with a stomach ulcer. Although both of us collapsing secured a spot in the home, the sister-in-law starts complaining again. Seeing this, the mother-in-law spoke up. Why are you still here? You're still being allowed to stay, given the circumstances? Silent, the sister-in-law finally moves into the mother-child home. It seems she's getting by just fine now. We've hired a helper to care for the mother-in-law. Given her wishes and after considering our finances, we might move her into a facility. Peace has finally returned to our family. I'll never forget how my husband cried tears of joy when he saw me and the kids return home. I pray that my sister-in-law finds her own path and that we can continue to build such a family.
It's shallower than I thought. What a letdown. Mother-in-law sneered as she pushed me into the pond. I had endured her cruel antics for so long, but in that moment, something inside me snapped. My name is Jasmine. I'm 30 years old. I've been a stay-at-home wife for 7 years. I live with my husband Gordy, who's 8 years older than me, our 6-year-old daughter, and Gordy's mother. Gordy was my boss and I was his subordinate. Growing up, my parents divorced and I lived with my mom. I guess I always yearned for a father figure. Gordy, being 8 years older and competent at his job, seemed very appealing, but I never had a chance to get close to him. He was just someone I admired. However, we got closer during a team-building event. We bonded over our shared love for movies and hit it off. We started dating. I fell head over heels for the mature and kind Gordy. Then, about 6 months into our relationship, I found out I was pregnant. We hadn't discussed marriage yet, so I was more shocked than happy. I was anxious about how Gordy would react, but I couldn't keep it a secret forever. I mastered the courage and told Gordy. To my surprise, he was thrilled and suggested we get married. I was overjoyed by Gordy's feelings. When I told my mom, she was a bit surprised but happy for me. After her divorce, my mom raised me as a single mother. The reason for their divorce was my father's affair. I was only 2 at the time, so I barely remember my father. My mom worked tirelessly from dawn till dusk to raise me. Being an only child, dinners alone were lonely, but I didn't want to burden my mom. Even though she was busy, she showered me with love, and we have a great relationship. I always thought, when I get married, I don't want my child to feel lonely. I want to build a warm home. So I was determined to have a loving marriage and family. Things moved quickly, and we introduced each other to our families. Gordy had lost his father at a young age and lived with his mother. The first time I met Gordy's mother, she was kind, but I sensed something off in her occasional and cold expression. But she was the woman who gave birth to Gordy. I brushed off my unease, thinking she was just nervous. We had a simple wedding with just our families. I was getting the hang of my job and wanted to work until my due date, but Gordy insisted I become a housewife, so I quit. My mom suggested I take maternity leave instead of quitting, but Gordy disagreed. He said his mother was a dedicated housewife and he wanted the same for me, so I became a housewife. After marriage, at Gordy's insistence, we moved in with mother-in-law. That's when my nightmare began. I initially found comfort in having mother-in-law, an experienced mother around, but I was naive. Mother-in-law seemed resentful, as if I had stolen her precious son. Her attitude changed completely after our marriage, and she started to torment me. Yes, my initial instincts about her were right. As for Gordy, after our marriage, he became controlling and emotionally abusive. Apparently, his late father was a dominant figure, and neither Gordy nor mother-in-law could defy him. Mother-in-law was not allowed to work or even go out without permission. If Gordy showed any defiance, he was beaten and berated. Their father's authority was absolute. They endured this together. When Gordy's father passed away from an illness at 22, they celebrated. After that, they lived happily as a duo. I believe the kind Gordy I knew before our marriage was genuine, but after seeing his mother's disdain for me, his love waned. To Gordy, his mother was more important than his wife. Whenever Gordy was cold or verbally abusive to me, mother-in-law looked satisfied. Gordy would appease her, saying, "Mother, I'm married, so you could have an easier life. Jasmine will do everything for you." I think the two of them felt some twisted sense of revenge by treating me the way Gordy's father had treated them. It was utterly unfair to me, but I felt helpless. In the early days of our marriage, I suffered from severe morning sickness, sometimes unable to get out of bed. Yet, mother-in-law would say, "You're exaggerating this morning sickness thing. Who do you think you are? Get up and make dinner." She even forced me to do household chores. She would make me carry heavy bags and even intentionally pushed me once. Gordy, of course, didn't defend me. Instead, he would say, "I'm busy working. You're probably just napping all day. And you still eat the food I provide." I endured, hoping that maybe when our child was born, mother-in-law and Gordy would change. My mom, concerned about me living with mother-in-law and being pregnant, often called or messaged, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. She had raised me through hardships and always wished for my happiness. I didn't want her to worry or sadden her. I always reassured her with a cheerful voice, saying everything was fine, that Gordy and mother-in-law were taking good care of me, and I was happy. She might have suspected something, but always said, "Remember, I'm on your side. Tell me if anything's wrong." Then, I safely gave birth to a beautiful girl named Judith. The joy of her birth made me momentarily forget the torment from mother-in-law and Gordy. I vowed to live for Judith from that day on. My mom offered to take care of me postpartum at her home, but mother-in-law with a smile said, "Don't worry, we'll take good care of Judith here," denying me the chance to return to my parents. Normally, new mothers rest for a month after childbirth. But my mother-in-law had me working the day after I was discharged. Their treatment of me didn't change after Judith's birth. It got worse. Knowing I was up all night nursing, they still forced me to wake up early for chores. On top of that, I had to care for the baby. I was utterly exhausted, stressed, and sleep-deprived. Mother-in-law, seeing my worn-out state, would laugh, saying I looked like a vagrant every night. Tears streamed down my face. Judith was my only solace. The one saving grace was that Judith looked like Gordy, so both he and mother-in-law adored her, though their idea of adoring was just playing with her occasionally. I was relieved because I had feared they might mistreat Judith too. When Judith was about 3, I told Gordy I wanted to work outside. He scoffed, saying,
"Who would hire someone like you with hardly any work experience?"
Mother-in-law laughed, calling me a useless wife. In truth, I was at my limit and wanted to save money to leave with Judith, but they wouldn't let me work and I gave up on ever leaving. I thought, who would hire someone with so little experience? I had no money of my own, and for Judith's sake, I realized I had to endure. From then on, no matter how mother-in-law and Gordy treated me, I bore it all for my beloved daughter Judith. Even after 7 years of marriage, mother-in-law and Gordy remained the same. The only change was in Judith. From around age 4, she would sadly watch me being mistreated. When we were alone, she would hug me and say, "Mommy, just bear it a little longer. When I grow up, I'll protect you." Ever since she was little, Judith could sense the unfair treatment I endured, and it deeply hurt her young heart. Her presence alone became my beacon of hope. With mother-in-law and Gordy keeping a close watch, I couldn't freely go out. Even on the rare occasions I went shopping, mother-in-law would accompany me. However, once Judith started attending elementary school, I got the chance to step outside with just her during drop-offs and pickups. Previously, I couldn't even meet my own mother, but sometimes she would wait near the school to see us, so our meetings became more frequent. Whenever we met, my mom would ask, "Are you okay?" I couldn't tell her the truth about my situation, so I always reply, "I have Judith, I'm happy." I had also told Judith to keep our real situation a secret from my mom. Then one day, Judith expressed a desire to visit a community park a bit far from our home. She had heard from friends about a pond there with a family of turtles and was eager to see them. Gordy, being the doting father,
"If Judith wants to go, I'll take her anywhere."
So it was decided that we would visit the park on his next day off. Of course, mother-in-law would come along. The day of our trip to the community park arrived. I woke up at 5 a.m. to prepare sandwiches for the entire family. Making sandwiches took time since Gordy and mother-in-law had big appetites. While I was busy with preparations, the two of them were leisurely playing on their phones. Upon reaching the community park, it was evident that it was a popular spot bustling with families. We quickly headed to the pond to see the turtles, and sure enough, there was a cute family of turtles. Judith was ecstatic, exclaiming, "So cute!" I smiled, watching her joy. Suddenly, someone forcefully pushed me from behind and I fell into the pond. I had a traumatic experience of nearly drowning in the ocean as a child, so I was terrified of water and couldn't swim. Mother-in-law knew this because I had shared the story before. Thrown into the pond, panic overtook me as I flailed around. Judith cried out, "Mommy!" Mother-in-law remarked, "Falling into a pond? What a foolish daughter-in-law," and laughed without trying to help. Gordy, laughing, took photos of me in the pond. Seeing their reactions, something inside me snapped. Fortunately, the pond wasn't too deep, and I managed to stand. Mother-in-law, seeing I was okay, said with a hint of disappointment, "It's surprisingly shallow, what a pity." At that moment, I was certain mother-in-law had pushed me. That night, anger kept me awake. I wanted revenge, but considering Judith's future, I thought it might be better to endure and stay with a financially stable Gordy. I spent the entire night thinking. The next morning, an hour away to school, Judith turned to me with determination and said, "Mommy, it's okay. Divorce Daddy. Grandma and Daddy are terrible. I'm on your side." I was touched but hesitant, wondering, is divorce really the right choice? The following day, as we approached the school, I saw my mom. Judith ran to her with joy. I hurried over, curious about their conversation. My mom hugged me, saying, "Why didn't you tell me the truth? You have endured so much." Judith whispered, "Mommy, it's okay, right? I told Granny everything." Mom encouraged me, saying, "Get a divorce. It's okay. You're still young and you can try again." She then went on to say, "You should hire a lawyer. I'll pay for the lawyer's fees. I'm sorry I didn't notice." From that day, with Judith's help, I began gathering evidence. Gordy's verbal abuse, mother-in-law's derogatory comments, everything was recorded. Unaware of this, mother-in-law and Gordy continued their behavior. Gordy's constant belittling and my mother-in-law's endless insults were all caught on my voice recorder. Unaware of this, both Gordy and mother-in-law continued their hurtful ways. Sometimes, I would intentionally tell Gordy, "I want to work outside," to which he would reply,
"Who would hire someone like you, idiot?"
I would also act sad in front of mother-in-law just to hear her say,
You look so down, pathetic.
With these tactics, I gathered plenty of evidence. Then one day, mother-in-law, who never cared about her salt intake despite her age, suffered a stroke due to high blood pressure and became paralyzed. She was discharged from the hospital, but both Gordy and mother-in-law expected me to take care of her.
Jasmine, you'll take care of me, right? I am so pitiful.
And,
"Hey, Jasmine, take care of mother. If you're rough with her, you'll regret it."
I firmly replied, "I won't look after mother-in-law. She's your mother, Gordy. You take care of her." I had never talked back before, so they were momentarily stunned. But Gordy quickly yelled,
"You better take care of her."
The next day, Gordy left for work. I had no intention of caring for mother-in-law. I planned to ignore her completely. While I was in the living room, I heard mother-in-law calling me from her room. She sounded frantic. I didn't want to help, but I decided to check on her. She looked pale and said,
Jasmine, I need to use the bathroom.
I coldly replied, "Go ahead on your own." She cried out,
How could you? Hurry up and help me.
Apparently, she had forgotten to wear her adult diapers. She then had an accident and started crying from embarrassment. Filled with a desire for revenge, I didn't help. Instead, I called Gordy's workplace. When he rushed home and saw mother-in-law, he shouted at me.
"I told you to take care of her."
I calmly responded, "I told you I wouldn't. Have you forgotten how you both treated me?" Mother-in-law kept repeating,
You brute! You brute!
"Which one is brute anyway?" I finally handed Gordy divorce papers. Gordy probably had no idea that I would initiate a divorce. He was in shock. I said, "I have had enough. I want a divorce, and of course, I'll take custody of Judith." Both mother-in-law and Gordy were yelling, but when I played the voice recordings, they froze. Gordy's morally harassing comments and mother-in-law's heartless comments were recorded. I said, "I have all the evidence. I'm confident I would win in court." Gordy muttered,
"I can't believe you recorded us."
Mother-in-law still shouted,
Judith won't choose you. She won't.
When Judith came home from elementary school, mother-in-law sweetly asked,
Judith, who do you want to live with, Grandma or Mommy?
Judith firmly replied, "Of course, Mommy. Grandma and Daddy are always mean to Mommy. I will always live with Mommy. I hate Daddy and Grandma." The two were visibly shaken. It seemed like he was really tired of being told that Judith, who he loved so much, hated him. Did you hear that? Judith wants to live with me. Please live peacefully together from now on. I packed my bags and left. I never returned to Gordy and mother-in-law's house. I finalized the divorce through a lawyer. According to the lawyer, Gordy couldn't care for mother-in-law who was now paralyzed. She was placed in a nursing home, but due to her nasty attitude, no one wanted to be around her. Gordy, devastated by Judith's rejection, couldn't go to work and took a leave of absence. Now, Judith, my mom, and I live together, and I'm actively job hunting. My new life is just beginning.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie. making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, "I'm thirsty." Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. All right, everyone's presentations are done. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me. There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. Still here? Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. I'm leaving. I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! What's wrong? Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike, what have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.